Good morning, everyone. So we are live on day 3 of the Game Changer Challenge. The last 2 days have been amazing. You all have engaged so much. I've had some brilliant comments from you, so I can see that you've already been enjoying it, and I'm really pleased. It's exactly what I designed this for. So day 3, we are ending on a really good one. This is personal branding, why you need to develop a personal brand even if you feel like you're just a solitary freelancer and maybe you don't need to worry about the kinds of things that big brands do. So I'm going to talk you through that today. Before I start, I need to remind you to register for the masterclass, which is on Friday the 22nd, and I'll be going live at 10 a.m. UK time again. Now, this masterclass is going to be a longer session than these challenges have been. It'll be about an hour in total. It includes a live Q&A. And I am going to be talking about how to make 2024 the year that it all turns around, because I feel like there is so much opportunity these days for freelancers. There's so many things that we can be doing to level up and to increase our visibility, to increase the amount of money that we earn, to increase the types of work that we bring in that we really love. And really, it's about figuring out the business side of things, the business piece to go along with that. Good morning, Asa. Thank you for being here. And so Friday's masterclass is going to be a really good one. I really don't want you to miss out. It's completely free to access, as the challenge has been. So please do remember to register. There is a link in the Facebook group as well, but I will also be including a link to register when I send the replay of this to those of you who are watching on replay. Okay, let's get going. All right, so when you think of a brand, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Is it something like Nike or Prada or Adidas, those kind of really big brands? If that's what you think of when you think of a brand, you're not alone, because most of us think of those big corporate kind of machines as brands, big organizations, even if they're not corporate, but big organizations is what we tend to think of. And when we talk about branding in the individual sense, it's not always positive. So that phrase that some people say, oh, that's so on brand for so-and-so, like meaning that the behavior is really typical of that person. There can also be like a bit of a negative connotation, like it's like, oh, so typical of that person, So, and then there can also be a sense that when we apply branding to ourselves as individuals, that we're doing something fake, or we're being kind of inauthentic and projecting something that isn't real. But I really believe that our personal brand as freelancers is so important, because firstly, you are a business if you're a freelancer, and it's something we've talked about in the last couple of days. If you're a freelancer, you are a business. There's no other way. There's no way around it, really. You are paying your own taxes. You're in charge of money coming in and money going out. You are a business, even if it's a small business. And every business needs a brand. But when we think of our brand, sometimes the things that we might initially think of are things like, social media, like how we appear on social media, or a flashy kind of website. Some people have got some really beautiful websites these days. And we might think of things like colors and fonts and all of that stuff, but that is just the window dressing. That's just the shiny bits that we see. And those are ways of conveying a brand, but they are not the brand itself, because the foundations of a brand really go so much deeper. And when an organization is building a brand, for example, they will look at the brand characteristics. They'll look at who they want to speak to, primarily, who is their ideal client. And they'll think about what they want that client to be doing when they encounter the brand. So lots of product-based brands, the end goal is get the person to buy the brand and ideally tell their friends and family about it, so word of mouth. There are brands that are more about awareness raising, kind of calls to action, activism, that kind of thing. So a brand also isn't just about what the product or service is about, but it's very much about speaking to a client and enacting a certain action, or yeah, it kind of deciding what it is you want that person to do when they encounter the brand. And then you come to the kind of the surface, superficial elements of fonts and colors and so on. And if you look at products aimed at women, they often have pinks and purples and those sorts of pastel colors and kind of those loopy sort of cursive fonts. Now that doesn't appeal to me at all. That's not my style. But we can all see when we see that kind of branding, we know who they're trying to appeal to, even if it doesn't appeal to us. And they're very intentional about it. No one's trying to sell men's aftershave with a pink bottle and kind of loopy cursive font. So that's a very crude example. But my point is to say that the intention in branding is so important. And often these things that a brand is trying to convey are not very explicit. Sometimes a brand might say for men or for women. Very rarely do they do that. They often convey who it's for, what type of person it's for, with everything that they say about it, every visual that they include, the language that they use as well. It can be very conversational or very chatty, or it could be very formal, or it could be very direct or indirect. So it really depends on what they're trying to get the person to do. So what does that have to do with us as freelance writers? We're not, Nikes or Pradas. Well, your brand really is what you are known for, what your clients associate with you and what they will come to you for. So, for example, some freelancers are known as a safe pair of hands. They know that they will send you the job and you will get it done. You'll get it done to the deadline and you'll be probably quite nice to work with. Other freelancers may be incredibly creative and really kind of think outside the box and are quite, really innovative with the way that they think. But they can be a lot more unpredictable. And so that is their brand. And how a client responds to that very much depends on the client themselves and their brand. So, for example, when I was a commissioning editor and I was working for New Scientist, and it was for the print magazine, there were people, freelancers would pitch story ideas to me pretty often. And as I would sift through it, the freelancers that I had already worked with, I would know, okay, this isn't the most dazzling story or new story, but it's a good story. And more importantly, I know that freelancer is going to deliver on time, to length. They're going to be responsive if I ask for edits. And those are all really important things. And they were very important things to me as an editor. So I was a client in that setting. Then there was another writer who came up. He came up with the most incredible story ideas. I'd often never heard about the particular, kind of idea that he was talking about. It was so new and so out there, and I knew it would make a good story, but he was super unreliable. And if you're commissioning for a print magazine, you can imagine that if he didn't produce, I would have a big fat hole, blank space in my magazine. So I would need to come up with something last minute, and it wouldn't be great. So for me, my own values were, I would maybe take a risk on the unpredictable, super creative people occasionally, but I would want to go for more predictable people more often than not. And perception in this is everything. So someone who's a mentor of mine, Lucy Sheridan, who is an incredible social media guru, she talks a lot about comparison. She has a saying that if selling houses about location, 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 then building a brand is perception, perception, perception. And this is so important because your brand really is, you can try and convey whatever you want, but if people perceive you differently, what they perceive is what your brand is. So what we really are trying to get to is a point where our own values and what we want to convey as our brand are really aligned with how people perceive us. And there are lots of ways that we can do this. So intentionality is really key, Because if you're not intentional, you might develop a brand that you really weren't intending to develop. So to give you an example, in my industry, so as a science writer and editor, part of the brand as a freelancer that I unintentionally kind of started cultivating was someone who would fix kind of abandoned or badly written projects. So where the person they'd hired initially did a really bad job or just couldn't finish for whatever reason. So I would get this, usually time would be short because the deadline's kind of imminent, and then I'd turn it into something decent. And initially it was a bit of an ego boost because I thought, we all have egos, and I thought, oh, people are coming to me to fix things. After a while, though, I really had to think about, is this how I want to work? Like, do I want to take, it's a very British expression, but do I want to take a dog's dinner and create something from it? Because if you have ever done this, it's never that satisfying, right? Like, you can have a certain satisfaction in kind of salvaging and taking something that was actually pretty bad and creating something decent. But it's never going to be as good as if you were involved right from the beginning and you had time to plan and you worked with designers or anyone else involved in the process. It's never going to be as great as that. And so I really decided that by being unintentional with my brand, I realized that I had created this, this brand perception of myself as someone who will dive in at the last second, often working to really crazy deadlines, and then to fix things. So I needed and I wanted my brand to change. And so it is important to remember that if you don't define your brand, even if you feel like your personal brand is not that important, or maybe you think, if you're, let's say, a writer or a designer or an artist, maybe you think your brand is evident. It's not always evident. Your craft may be evident. Someone knows you're a writer, let's say. What kind of writer you are, unless you convey enough of that to them, they won't know. And so your brand will get defined for you if you do nothing about it. It will be an accidental brand that maybe reflects who you are. But usually when we're not intentional about something, it's quite rare that something just kind of happens to perfectly match what you would have intended. So for me, my accidental brand was, the person who would fix things. For you, it might be they come to you because you don't charge very much and you're known as the person who will always do something on an extremely low budget. So the client's coming to you because they have very little budget. And they go, oh, I know, this person is exactly the person I need to reach out to because they've always done it for very little money. Maybe you're the person whose brand is they can send you something on like a Thursday night or a Friday morning and you have it done by Monday morning, because they know that you don't prioritize your weekends and you always seem to say yes to these things. So what you have to think about, even if you do have a brand, or you feel like you do have a brand, is that the brand that you really want? Like, does it really reflect you and your values and how you want to run your career? And your values in this sense may be professional. So they may be, for example, there was a client that I once worked with who, because I work in the health and science space, I need to make sure that everything that I put in my article is evidence-based and is fair for me to say as a science writer. And there was a client who was sort of encouraging this kind of, well, if we don't know any better sort of thing. And it didn't align with my own values and my own ethics. And I couldn't really work with them anymore. But your values may be personal. So I used to work frequently on weekends and evenings. Now I really only do it when it's an absolute emergency or the final stages of a project where I do need to put in some extra time, but I don't do it routinely anymore, which is what I used to do. For many reasons. I'm older, I've worked for many years, and I kind of feel like I don't really want to do that anymore. I also have quite a young kid still, and it doesn't feel right for me to work on weekends. So my values now are quite different than they were 20 to 25 years ago, and I want my brand to reflect that accordingly. Now, the thing is that building a brand as a personal brand as a freelancer really does take courage, because you're putting your own sense of self and your own values in a much more visible space than, for example, if you take a brand like Nike. Although there will be a CEO and, a couple of people at the top whose job is to lead the company, it's very rare that you have a founder. It's very rare that you have one person who is responsible for a big corporation, or who feels so personally tied to the fortunes of that corporation. And it's usually rarely their own values once you get beyond the small startup. When you've got a big organization, it's the brand values and that what they're selling, their products or whatever it is. But when you're a freelancer, it is your own self you're often representing, and your services and your ability that you're selling as well. And so it does take more to kind of to actually stand up and say, well, this is what I'm about, this is not what I'm about. That does take courage. And so if it's been hard to do, or it feels tricky to do, I fully understand. But we're going to talk about some ways in which we can make it a little bit easier. And as an example of how I really struggled with this, so science writers can often be quite serious in the way that we present ourselves, and with good reason, because if you're writing about science or health, you want the researchers you're writing about to take you seriously. You want your editors to take you seriously, or the people that you're working with. And when I started to talk about things like the business of freelance, exactly what I'm talking to you about today, I really started to get a bit of imposter syndrome, because I thought, I'm talking about things like authenticity and empowerment and being visible and showing up, and that's not what I've talked about so far. And also writers, and I think science writers, maybe especially, but maybe not, don't tend to make their work about themselves. So to make my work very much about me, I thought, would someone else come across it and find it really embarrassing? Or, I really struggled. And then I had a call with a science writer I know through some mutual friends, who said she wanted to grow her freelance career. And we talked for about half an hour about how she could find more clients. She was really struggling with finding new and different clients. So she worked with the same client that she'd worked for when she was a staff editor, which is what happens to lots of us when we're freelance, when we go freelance for the first time. So she really struggled with knowing how to diversify. So we had a call, and after the call, she sent me a message, and she said she was really fired up to go to inject new life into her freelance career. And I was really buzzing that I'd helped her. And I then realized that actually this part of me is just as much part of me as the part that likes writing serious science stories. So it is still part of my brand. And I'm collecting evidence from my career over years and distilling it down. So it is still concrete, and it's still factual, and it's not based purely in emotion or things that I've imagined. But I only really realized that when I kind of, oh yes, yeah, this is a brilliant comment that X Twitter is an example of a large company whose branding, yes, is pretty closely tied to the individual. It's true. And I feel like that also then means that the fortunes are buffeted very much by the perception of that individual. So yeah, that's true, that there are some very big brands who they're connected to one person. But so when I really started to realize what my personal brand was and what it could encompass, that changed things, because then I could actually fully step into that. Because as we've talked about yesterday with networking, and on Monday with money mindset, if you're not truly believing what you're saying to your clients, what you're projecting, the kind of image that you're putting out there, it doesn't ring true. No one's going to believe it. Even if you create a beautiful website, and even if you hire someone to do your social media, no one's really going to be believing it if that doesn't come from a place of sincerity and truth. And so what I would really like us to do today is we're going to start thinking about defining what really feels like you, what feels authentic to you, and what other sort of clients you want to attract. Now, I'm not talking about this in a kind of manifestation, law of attraction kind of way. It's not something I personally am completely aligned with, but I mean that the brand that you project and how you convey yourself, and this is so many different things, the confidence that you project when you talk to people, but very much your branding as well, will change the types of clients who approach you. So, for example, I don't get approached by people anymore asking me to do something with a 48-hour turnaround, or with, like sending me something on a Friday and giving it in on a Monday, because I've put down those boundaries very clearly in the past, and I don't project that that is my brand as someone who will do these quick fixes anymore. I remember someone approaching me quite a few years ago when from a non-profit organization, asking me to work for what was almost half, I think, my day rate at the time. And I said, well, I'm really sorry, but this is my minimum day rate. This is what I work for. I can't work for anything less than this. And she said to me, well, we're a charity. Can't you just treat this as like a charitable act? And complement your income with your other more high earning clients. And I mean, this was super inappropriate, and really not her place to be telling me how to manage my finances. But it was because I wasn't very confident in how I was asking for money and how I was presenting myself. And so that was reflected onto me. No one would ask me that now, partly because I'm older and I'm more established, but no one would come to me and ask me to cut my rate in half and expect me to do that. So what you project very much influences the types of clients who are drawn to you. And being intentional is so important as a consequence. So your action for today, here's how you figure out what your current brand is. If you are not entirely sure what your brand might be, or even if you are, it's worth analyzing whether that brand really represents how you want to be seen. And if you're not sure what your current brand is, think about what people most come to you for. So one is you're not sure what your current brand is at all. You could think about what people most come to you for, what they most ask you for. And in this bit, I would say it's quite easy to sometimes assume that if clients are asking you for very short turnarounds, or if they're offering very little money, to just assume that's just how it is. We're quite good at sort of assuming that our individual experience is how the world of freelancing is in general. And it's usually not the case. If clients are always coming to you and offering very little money, or way below what you think you should be earning for a particular project, or if they're asking for very unrealistic turnaround times, it's worth analyzing what you're actually putting out there. So look at what people most come to you for. And if that's not what you want, if those values are not what you want to convey, what could you change about one of those things? So let's say, for example, someone's always coming to you with a very, very short turnaround times. If, as I have done in the past, you say, yeah, sure, and you're internally seething and really resentful, but you don't ever communicate that with your client, you're never conveying how you actually feel or what your values are. So you might still take the job, because I understand that sometimes we can't always turn down work. You might still take the job, but how you communicate to the client about, it would be really great to have more time in future. You could do so much better a job if you had more time. You're moving away from doing these very short turnaround projects. This communicates to people, and people do change. There's always a fear that, oh, well, if I say no, then I'm never going to get offered anything again. You may not be offered that type of job, but you don't want that type of job. If what you're trying to do is move away from being offered things with a 48-hour turnaround, then the only way you can move away from that is to communicate that, and to try not to take those things and to look for other things. So intentionality is really key. So that concludes our final training session for this week in this challenge. I just want to thank all of you for showing up here, for engaging. Please let me know any thoughts in the comments here about what you've thought about your own branding and how you feel about it. And I hope that the homework, I don't like to call it homework, I like to prefer to call it actions. I hope that that's really useful in changing a little bit how we think about our brands. I will remind you again about the masterclass on Friday because I think you're really going to love it. But I will also put reminders in emails and the Facebook group. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And I will see you shortly. I'll see you on, yes, let me look at these comments that are coming in here. Cecile, yes, with portrait. So Cecile does portrait photography. Just a quick photo or two for, what was it, 1/10 of the cost. Yeah, I mean, this is really, really common. I think the understanding, another really key thing when you're talking to people, when you're conveying what your brand is also conveying how much time something takes you, you know. I will put this on here as well to show Asa's comment, a list of things to do to move forward in your freelance career. It's going to be a good year. It is going to be a good year. I firmly believe that. And Kerry says, thank you, these have been brilliant. Looking forward to Friday. Yes, I can't wait to see all of you here on Friday. Okay, bye for now.